this is going to talk about how Spotify should pay artists. But before we do that, we have to get into how Spotify currently pays artists. And keep in mind, Spotify is probably never going to do most of these things, but if anyone's watching, please take my advice. So currently on Spotify, about 70% of the money that they take in goes directly to rights holders. What that means is artists and labels. That 30% extra is what Spotify actually takes, and that's what they use to run the platform, handle marketing, pay their employees, pay their owners, etc. So 70% of their money instantly goes away. And actually, Spotify is mostly lost money every single year, its entire existence, up until last year, or 2024, I think was their first profitable year ever. They might not even have had an entirely profitable year, just several profitable quarters. So the reason I bring that up is because a lot of artists think that Spotify needs to just pay artists more. And the reality of the situation is you can't magically make up money, right? They don't have the money to give out. Even if they paid out 100% of every dollar they took in, they paid their employees nothing, they paid the shareholders nothing, they paid the CEO nothing, and he redistributed all of his wealth to every artist on Spotify, which there are about 11 million of them. It wouldn't do anything. It would make practically no statistical difference. It would be like a 1% raise for every artist on Spotify. And temporarily, and then Spotify would go out of business, and a bunch of artists would lose a gigantic source of revenue. So that's a non-starter. Aside from that, the way that Spotify pays out royalties is not the way you think it is. There isn't a flat payment per royalty like, hey, it's a third of a penny you're going to get per stream. On average, right now, globally, it is about 1/3 of a penny per stream. But the reality is it varies by country. It varies by type of plan the listener is on. It also varies by the music distributor that the artist releases their music through. If they're on a label, they might have a higher rate than if they're on an indie distributor, and different indie distributors may have different rates, and that's just all because it's done by negotiations. And the way Spotify decides how much money to pay out is they look at all the royalties that are generated in a given country, and it's broken down by plan type, and then they divide it by the number of streams that happen on that plan in that country, and then they have an average royalty payment for that artist that gets paid. What that means, though, is if someone streams music way more than another person does, then that other person has more power in terms of who gets paid more. And the reality of that translates into, let's say you only listen to some niche small band. And just to throw an example, let's say you listen to Fair to Midland, which is one of my all-time favorite bands. They have less than 50,000 monthly listeners, and they've been defunct for years. But let's say you only listen to that band, and maybe you listen to 10 songs a day. You would kind of hope that your entire subscription money, which is now $12 a month, let's just call it 10, and of that, Spotify takes 3, so the artist would get 7. You would hope that Fair to Midland would get your $7. The reality, though, is if you're not listening to a ton of music, they're not getting that 7. In fact, they're definitely not, because the way it works is they're looking at the overall country by plan pool, and since there's a lot of people that listen to 100 songs a day, and a lot of them are binging the most popular music in the world, listening to it over and over and over again, a big chunk of the money of your subscription is going to artists that you never listen to, like Taylor Swift, Ed Sheeran, Ariana Grande, Drake, whatever, right? It's not going mostly to the artist that you're actually listening to. It can, but in reality, it just doesn't. So now let's get into what Spotify should actually do about the problem. We already established they can't just magically make more money. They obviously can't operate on no dollars. They need to make money as a business. They need to pay their employees. They need to pay for marketing. They need to pay for the services and all that. And we already established they pay out 70% of the money they take into rights holders, artists, and labels. And the first thing I think they should do, and this might be a little bit of a controversial take, but I hope it isn't, they should double their prices. And every streaming service should do this, and they're kind of already doing it. They started at $9.99, and they were that for years. $9.99 a month, at least in the United States. $9.99 a month for Spotify Premium. There's different discounts and bundles and whatever, but now it's $11.99 in the US. So they already have increased it, 20% of the way to doubling it. And there's plans to keep increasing it year after year. So I think they should get to a point where the price is $20 a month. And I think people will pay it. Reason is, people will pay $50 a month so they can have Netflix, Hulu, Disney Plus, HBO Max, Amazon Prime, right? Or whatever 5 they want. People will pay $50 a month because they want to stream this, right? They don't want to have to constantly turn off and reactivate their subscriptions. Music platforms aren't like that. You pay for 1 and you get the world's music. You don't need 5. So I think people will pay $20 a month because they're not going to go back to digital downloads. They're not going to go back to pirating music. It's just too inconvenient. The people that are already doing downloads and pirating music are going to keep doing it, and the people that are already streaming are probably going to keep doing it. At least that's my bet. So I think they should double rates, which should instantly double the average global stream rate from 1/3 of a penny to 2/3 of a penny. Huge impact, not something you could ever do by redistributing the executives' money. You're not paying the employees or paying out every dollar that the company makes directly to artists. Doubling the royalty or doubling the cost of the subscription will instantly make the biggest possible difference of anything that they could possibly do. And this should make sense. The pipe dream of getting unlimited music from every artist in the world for $10 a month, it was obvious that was never going to work, right? Like, that could never sustain forever, just because it's too good of a deal. And so this shouldn't really come as a surprise, in my opinion. So the second thing is something that I think a lot of you will agree with, and that's switching to an artist-centric royalty model instead of a pool system that they have now, right? So it's basically, if you listen exclusively to this artist, all of your money that would go to artists goes to that artist, instead of it going to all those artists that you don't listen to. Like right now, due to the pool system, most of your money doesn't go to the artists you listen to, it goes to whoever is getting the most streams in the platform. Under an artist-centric royalty system, the money only goes to the people you listen to. Your money only goes to the people you listen to. And that means each individual user has more power to support the artists that they want to support. And there's been a bunch of studies on user-centric versus artist-centric royalty systems, and they have shown that some indie artists will make less money under them. And that's a reality of it. I don't care. I care about that it's more fair. It's more fair that whatever you spend the most percentage listening to, or whatever percentages you break down across your listening habits, that's what you're actually paying for. And this is how it works on YouTube Premium. When you're paying for YouTube Premium, like some of you might be watching this video with YouTube Premium right now, you're not seeing ads. The way they break down the way your subscription goes is by percentage of watch time. So if you spend 100% of your watch time in a month watching my channel, the entire chunk of your YouTube Premium subscription goes to me. It doesn't go to like Mr. Beast, right? That's kind of how Spotify works right now. Imagine if your YouTube Premium money didn't go to you, but instead went to other creators. Point number 3 is to reallocate Spotify Discovery Mode income. So if you're not familiar with Spotify Discovery Mode, essentially it's a marketing tool in Spotify that's free, but to use it and get more exposure with the tool, you're giving Spotify 30% of the earnings for the streams they get you in radio and autoplay. And, you know, love it or hate it, there's definitely some controversial aspects to it. For most artists, it actually not only gets you more exposure, but also makes you more money, just because of the increase in streaming that you get. So what I'm saying is, instead of Spotify pocketing that 30% on every single stream they get across the board, they should reallocate that money to artists who are driving people to the platform. Right now, Discovery Mode is used to make Spotify as a company more money, which they have to do because their margins are razor thin. In fact, they're mostly losing money still. So instead of keeping that money, like we're already talking about doubling their monthly streaming payment, they're going to reallocate it to people who drive people to the platform. So if you're using Discovery Mode, you're going to get a normal streaming rate. But if you drive people from somewhere else to Spotify and you're the first artist they listen to, then you're going to get an incentive that's funded off of Discovery Mode. And I think this is a little perhaps controversial because it's kind of like what Deezer tried with their, I forget what they called it, but the UMG Lucian Grange or whatever guy talked about this for Deezer, and they've been trying it, and the people were kind of pissed about it because it's kind of redistributing the way that money's paid, and it's not all equal. But if you think about it, if you're the one driving someone to the platform, you should be rewarded because you actually not only helped yourself, you helped a bunch of other artists who are going to get listened to after your music too. So if you're, you know, using Discovery Mode and getting streams from the platform, you're still losing that 30%, but it's funding the people who are driving the listeners to the platform, which I think is much more fair than Spotify just getting that money. Thing number 4, and I think most artists will like this, and I don't know if Spotify will ever do it, but it's to allow for fan subscriptions on the platform. Imagine if you go to an artist in Spotify and you have their About section, and you have their tickets, and you have their whatever, and their shop. Imagine if there was a community section or a membership section, and you could just go on the artist and just join their tier, and maybe the artist can charge $5 a month or $10 a month or even $2 a month to give fans like kind of a Patreon-like membership experience right natively to Spotify. Spotify could even take a 30% cut of this revenue. And I don't think creators would care because Patreon only takes 12%, and I think YouTube takes 30% for their membership thing. So that would actually be kind of industry standard for Spotify to take 30%, just like they do with the regular streaming money. And they could, one, make more money as a company from that tier, but also, two, artists would make the bulk of that money. And all the algorithmic stuff they get from Spotify, or the editorial they cover from Spotify, it's causing all these fans to check out their profile. And the big problem artists have is driving people off of Spotify to go support them. But what if that support structure was just on Spotify? And maybe additionally, we already have the shop integration directly on Spotify where someone can go to their Shopify store directly from there and see their products and stuff. But what if an artist could also sell exclusive albums or something? So not like digital downloads, because downloads are pain, but they could unlock an album that they could stream. So an artist could, let's say they're released, I don't know, they have 10 albums out, but they have like one album that's not really out, but a fan could spend $5 and unlock this exclusive album to enjoy, right? And it'd be kind of a unique thing that previously an artist would only put that on their website or only on Patreon, but now it's on Spotify with the rest of the catalog, and Spotify makes more money and the artist makes more money. So to me, it's a win-win situation. Both parties make money. And that's really what it has to be. If both parties aren't making money, it's never going to be a sustainable relationship. Either the company is going to go under or the artists are going to leave. So thing number 5 is I think Spotify should let fans opt into a way to be contacted directly by the artist. The best case scenario would be, let's say you go to follow an artist on Spotify and you click follow, and there's a little notification bell or something, or a subscribe button where you can click it, and the artist gets the email address or the phone number. Best case scenario. Now the artist is kind of building their actual fan base, which is amazing. What I think Spotify would be more likely to do, perhaps, is, let's say you still have that button, but the artist doesn't get the email, they don't get the text message. However, the artist can contact the fan through email and text message through Spotify. So they log into Spotify for artists, and they can send, let's say, one message a month to anyone that's subscribed, or a certain amount. One message a week, one message a month, whatever, for free. But you have to go through Spotify, and Spotify sends the emails and sends the texts on their behalf. The reason for that is, that way Spotify still maintains their walled garden, where they're keeping people on their platform, and they can keep their shareholders happy, and they can keep making money, because if people, then the artist is incentivized to keep people on Spotify because that's where their list is. But the fan also now is a way to hit up their audience and maybe drive them to buy tickets, and maybe drive them to buy stuff from their store, and maybe drive them to do whatever off platform, but it's going through Spotify. Ideally, we would just get the information. But I think this is kind of a middle ground that Spotify might be more likely to lean on, and hopefully it doesn't turn into just another way for them to charge artists more money. I don't want them to charge artists money to send emails. That would be kind of the worst case scenario of this thing happening. Now, if you're wondering how many monthly listeners or streams it takes to make a full-time living from Spotify, check out this video right here. And if you want to learn how to promote your music on Spotify, check out this video on the bottom. And also let me know in the comments if you disagree, agree, or if you have any other suggestions for how Spotify could perhaps change their royalty structure to make it better for artists. Anyways, thanks for watching. I'll see you next video.